Hello everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're diving into something that many of us have experienced, the first date. It's a time filled with nervous excitement, the hope of meeting someone special, and the flutter of possibility. You pick out the perfect outfit, you rehearse a few witty conversation starters, and you imagine all the ways the night could go right. But what happens when that anticipation curdles into fear? What happens when the person sitting across from you isn't who they seem to be at all? The promise of a romantic evening can sometimes mask a much darker reality, a terrifying possibility that we often push to the back of our minds. But every now and then, the mask slips. The charming smile falters, revealing something cold and unsettling underneath. The stories we're going to explore today are not works of fiction. They are real accounts from people who walked into a date night expecting romance and instead found themselves in a real-life nightmare. These are the date nights that went horribly, terrifyingly wrong. Let's begin with our first story, which starts with a simple Tinder match. Our first story comes from a young woman named Chloe, who, like many people her age, was using dating apps to meet new people. After a few days of casual chatting, she matched with a man named Ben. He seemed perfect on paper. His profile was filled with photos of him hiking, spending time with his dog, and smiling with friends. He was charming, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her. They texted back and forth for about a week before he suggested they finally meet in person. He proposed a casual date, a walk through a scenic local park followed by a drink at a pub nearby. It sounded lovely and, most importantly, safe. The day of the date arrived and Ben picked her up from her apartment. He was just as handsome in person, and the initial conversation flowed easily. They drove to the park, and as they walked along the wooded trails, the sun began to set, casting long, deep shadows across their path. As they neared the end of their walk, Ben pointed toward a small, almost hidden path leading deeper into the woods. He said he knew a shortcut back to the car park that went past a cool old abandoned house he wanted to show her. Chloe hesitated for a moment. It was getting dark, and the idea of straying from the main path felt a little unsettling. But Ben's enthusiasm was infectious. He laughed and said, "Don't worry, I know these woods like the back of my hand. It'll be quick, I promise." The path was much narrower and more overgrown than the main trail. Twigs and branches snagged at their clothes as they walked, and the friendly chirping of birds was replaced by an unnerving silence. The air grew colder. Chloe started to feel that familiar prickle of anxiety on the back of her neck. She asked Ben how much further it was, and he just smiled, his face now harder to read in the dimming light. The easy, charming demeanor he'd had earlier seemed to be fading, replaced by a quiet, focused intensity that made her stomach clench with sudden, inexplicable dread. Finally, he stopped. Through a small clearing, she could see it, a dilapidated two-story house. It was not the cool, old, abandoned house she had pictured. It was a wreck. Windows were boarded up, the paint was peeling in large, leprous strips, and a rotted porch sagged precariously. It looked like something straight out of a horror film. "Here it is," Ben said, his voice flat and devoid of the warmth it had held just an hour before. He started walking towards the front door, expecting her to follow. Chloe froze. There was absolutely no way she was going inside that house. "I think I'd rather just head back to the car," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Ben turned to face her, and for the first time that night, his friendly smile was completely gone. His expression was cold, almost predatory. "Don't be silly," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We came all this way. I want to show you something inside." Thinking fast, Chloe clutched her stomach and doubled over, pretending to be in sudden, excruciating pain. "Oh my God," she gasped. "My appendix, I think it's bursting. It's happened to my sister before. I need to go to a hospital now." A few weeks later, after the initial shock had subsided, Chloe's curiosity got the better of her. She looked up his name online, digging deeper than she had before their date. What she found made her blood run cold. She discovered a series of local news articles from a few years prior. Another young woman had gone missing in the same area. Her last known contact was a man she had met on a dating app. That man was Ben. The woman was never found. Chloe realized she hadn't just escaped a bad date, she had escaped a killer. Our second story involves a woman named Sarah, who had just moved to a new city for work. Feeling a bit lonely and wanting to explore her new surroundings, she decided to try and meet people the old-fashioned way. One evening, she went to this quiet, trendy-looking bar in her neighborhood. She was sitting by herself, nursing a drink, when a man approached her. He was, honestly, incredibly handsome, well-dressed, and had a smile that could totally light up a room. He introduced himself as Mark, and after a bit of charming persuasion, she invited him to join her. They hit it off right away. The conversation was effortless, just flowing from one topic to the next with ease. Mark was witty, intelligent, and seemed genuinely captivated by everything Sarah had to say. He made her laugh so hard she nearly cried, and she found herself feeling more comfortable and excited than she had in a really long time. It felt like one of those perfect, movie-like meetings. As the evening wore on, Mark suggested they go to another bar he knew, a so-called hidden gem with the best cocktails in the city. Flushed with the success of the night so far, Sarah eagerly agreed. They left the first bar and walked a few blocks. The streets got quieter and the storefronts became sparser. Mark led her down a narrow alleyway to a plain, unmarked door. He pushed it open to reveal a dimly lit, sleek-looking bar. The strange thing was, it was completely empty. There were no other customers and there wasn't even a bartender in sight. "It's a private place," Mark explained smoothly. "My friend owns it. He told me I could bring you here for a private drink." Mark walked behind the bar, moving with a confident familiarity. He grabbed 2 glasses and a bottle of expensive-looking tequila. "Trust me, you're going to love this," he said with a wink, pouring them both a generous shot. He slid one of the glasses across the polished bar towards her. Sarah picked it up, her initial excitement now tinged with a growing sense of caution. Just as Sarah was about to take the drink, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from her sister, a pre-arranged safety check-in they always did when one of them was out with someone new. The message simply said, "Everything okay?" This small interruption was honestly the lifeline she didn't know she needed. It broke the spell Mark had cast over her. She put the glass down without drinking and texted back a quick, "Yes, fine." Looking up, she noticed Mark's smile had tightened ever so slightly. He was watching her, waiting for her to take the drink. "Go on," he urged, his voice just a little too persuasive. A powerful instinct suddenly screamed at her, "Don't drink it!" She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'm sorry, I feel really unwell. I need to go home," she said, her voice shaking. She turned and walked towards the door, not daring to look back at him. She pushed the door open, stumbled out into the alley, and ran. As the taxi pulled away, a sleek dark car suddenly pulled out from a side street and began to follow them. Sarah's blood ran cold. It was Mark. He was following her home. The date had turned into a terrifying chase through the city. About a month later, a friend sent her a news article from a neighboring state. The headline was chilling. A man had been arrested in connection with the disappearances of several women over the past few years. His method was always the same. He would meet them in bars, charm them, and then lure them to a secondary location where he would drug their drinks. The man's photo was in the article. It was Mark. The police had found the women's remains buried on a remote, isolated property owned by his family. That safety check-in text from her sister hadn't just saved her from a bad date, it had saved her life. Our final story is perhaps the most unsettling because it doesn't involve a stranger from a dating app or a bar. It involves someone much closer to home. A young woman named Jessica had been dating her boyfriend Ryan for about 6 months. They were what most people would call a perfect couple. He was kind, attentive, and her friends and family all adored him. They spent most of their weekends together, often opting for quiet nights in, cooking dinner and watching movies at his apartment. It was their comfortable, happy routine. One Saturday night, they were doing just that. They had ordered a pizza and were curled up on the sofa in Ryan's living room, starting a new horror movie. His apartment was on the 3rd floor of a modern, secure building, which always made Jessica feel safe. As the movie played, the atmosphere in the room grew tense, in line with the film's spooky plot. Outside, a storm was brewing, and the sound of wind and rain lashing against the windows only added to the cozy, slightly creepy ambiance of their movie night. About halfway through the movie, during a particularly quiet, suspenseful scene, they both heard it. A faint scratching sound. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the front door. They paused the movie and listened. The sound stopped. "Probably just the wind," Ryan said, reaching for the remote, but Jessica felt a prickle of unease. She asked Ryan to go and check, just to be sure. To placate her, Ryan got up and walked to the front door. He peered through the peephole and his body went rigid. He stood there for a long moment, completely still and silent. Jessica, watching him from the sofa, felt her own fear begin to rise. "What is it?" she whispered. "Who's there?" Ryan slowly stepped back from the door, his face pale. He turned to look at her, a strange, unreadable expression in his eyes. He didn't answer her question. He finally broke, his composure crumbling. He told her it was his ex-girlfriend. But this wasn't just any ex-girlfriend. This was a woman he had broken up with over a year ago, a woman he had a restraining order against. The tapping stopped, and a piece of paper slid under the door. Ryan quickly snatched it up before Jessica could see what was written on it. He read it, and all the color drained from his face. "We need to be quiet," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Completely quiet. Don't make a sound." He turned off the television, plunging the room into near-total darkness. They sat there on the sofa, huddled together in the terrifying silence, listening to the sound of the woman's breathing just outside the door.
For what felt like an eternity, they waited. They could hear her pacing in the hallway, her footsteps faint but clear. She would occasionally whisper his name, the sound muffled by the door making it even more terrifying.
After what seemed like hours, the footsteps finally faded and silence returned. They waited for another 20 minutes before Ryan crept to the door and looked through the peephole again. She was gone. The date night wasn't just ruined. Their sense of safety in that apartment was shattered forever. Jessica had never been so scared in her entire life. This wasn't a monster on a screen. This was a real, unpredictable threat just a few feet away. These stories are a stark and frightening look at how quickly a seemingly normal situation can devolve into a nightmare. For Chloe, a casual walk in the park nearly led her to an isolated house of horrors. For Sarah, a fun night out almost ended with her being drugged and abducted. And for Jessica, a cozy movie night turned into a terrifying siege by a dangerous stalker. What makes these accounts so deeply chilling is their reality. These aren't campfire tales or fictional horror stories designed to give us a cheap thrill. They are the lived experiences of people who placed their trust in someone else, only to have that trust violently betrayed. They highlight a vulnerability that exists in the search for connection. These experiences serve as a powerful reminder to always trust your gut. That small, nagging feeling that something is wrong, that flicker of unease in the presence of someone new. It's an instinct we should never ignore. In a world where we are increasingly connected through screens, it's more important than ever to be cautious, to have safety plans in place, and to listen to that inner voice when it tells you to run. The promise of a great date night is a beautiful thing, but as we've seen, it can sometimes mask a terrifying peril. The most frightening stories are often the true ones, because they remind us that the monsters aren't just in movies. Sometimes they're sitting right across the table from you, smiling and asking about your day. Thank you for joining me for this unsettling look into date nights gone wrong. Stay safe out there, and until next time, be aware of the stories unfolding all around you.